Let's talk for a minute about spiders. I know it's an uncomfortable subject for many people, but have we ever stopped to think about why? Why is there an aversion to spiders and, many other types of insects? But spiders in general, I see so many people out there who, when they see a spider, they immediately feel fear, or their first thought is just to kill it without even thinking about what kind of spider it is, whether it's beneficial, or, even deeper, thinking about that it's another life form and it has a purpose and it has a right to be here. So just for a moment, I want to delve into a little bit of information about spiders and maybe relieve some people's fears and share some of the knowledge that I've come into contact with in the last few years. I'm Kat Carr. I have a page on Facebook and a channel called Communicating with Non-Human Creatures, a View of the Unspoken World. And for several years now, I've been developing my ability to communicate with non-human creatures, which is, I'm basically referring to animals and insects. I'm not at this time delving into communicating with non-physical entities like spirits and that sort of thing. But there maybe are some parallels between the forms of communication. I've been able to understand more about the vibratory communication that I'm experiencing with non-human creatures by researching about psychic abilities, mediumship, those types of things, and how they're able to tune into those kind of things. Once I started learning more about frequency and vibration, that was where this ability became kind of second nature to me. And it was just a matter of me embracing it, because for many years I really pushed it down because I felt like that I was losing it. No one else seemed to have this ability, so there was really no one to talk to about it. And, if I did talk to anyone about it, they were like, what in the world? This is crazy. So, it's only been over the last few years, really, as I worked on myself and learned to love myself more and learned to accept myself more. And then, as that love from the inside grew, I was able to love and accept more of the outside world. And, in combination with researching different phenomenon and kind of understanding more about the unseen world, I think that's how it came into me being able to communicate in this kind of way, the vibrational communication. But as far as spiders go, most people are very terrified of spiders, and there's so many people that just, if they see a spider, they say, oh, I'm going to kill it. When I was a child, I was taught to kill a spider on sight, and I remember, hitting spiders with shoes and things because I was so little then, maybe 5, 6, 7 years old, and that's just what my parents had told me to do. And I think as a child, I hadn't developed the cognitive ability at that point to question it. I just did what they said with no feeling. And it wasn't until years later that I started to question, why? Or does this feel right for me? And it was really many more years later into my adulthood that I ever started to examine other life forms outside of the human world and think about them in their own sense. I mean, of course, I'd had companion animals around me and I, felt close to them. But insects, that's a whole nother level because, not too many people have insects as pets or companions and don't really give a lot of thought to what's going on in their world. So as I began to, work on my ability and open up to communicating with insects and with other creatures, there was a certain point where my perspective about even spiders, who I'd once been very afraid of, and, seen as only a pest or a nuisance to some extent, there was a point where my perspective literally changed, kind of doing the 180, where I started to really admire and respect spiders, and I started to look into them a little bit deeper, and just, I certainly wasn't a spider expert or anything, but I had enough respect and admiration for them that I knew I never wanted to kill another spider, and really I was feeling that way about all insects and, creatures. But So that's been that way for several years, that if there's a spider or any other type of non-human creature that makes its way into the house, I have my own little transport system that I can relocate them. And it's basically just a clear tube, kind of like some type of a vase, and maybe a foot and a half long, and it's closed on one end, open on the other end. So it's clear. You could totally see the little being who goes inside of it, and it doesn't hurt them at all. And I relocate them to the outside, to a safe place in nature. I've been doing that for several years now, at least I'd say 8 or 10 years, relocating every creature that's inside my house that's, non-human. And my oldest son, it's kind of funny because it's only been recently where he really started to realize that something was different about the way that I was doing this. He would always call on me whenever there was something in his room, whether it be a frog or a spider or a cricket or something. He'd say, "Oh, there's this or that in my room. Can you get it out?" And I'd go get my little tube and walk over to the creature. And from his perspective, what he saw was I walked up just, a little distance from them, and within a few seconds, they'd hop into the tube, and we'd go outside, and I'd relocate them and come back inside, and everyone's relieved. Oh, okay. And at some point he was saying, "Well, how do you do that so fast? How do you never even touch them and they just jump in the tube? How do you do that?" So it was only pretty recently that I started explaining to him, or trying to explain what I was doing with the communication. And he was just like, whoa, he was one of those people that gave me this crazy look and everything. And I'm like, well, you're asking, and that's what's going on. But anyhow, as far as my recent information with spiders, where I've gathered the most information was over the end of this past summer and up through the last few weeks. At some point, I guess midsummer, I started noticing a lot of spiders that were building their webs up in the trees. And some of the spiders were really high up in the trees, and some were kind of down lower with the, garden foliage and pot plants and stuff. And the ones that were lower usually end up relocating because something or someone is going to bump into their web. But there was one spider in particular who set up her web across my porch light. And the porch light is right next to my back door, where there's a lot of traffic in and out because I have 5 kids. And the porch light is about head level with me, eye level. So it's maybe, 4.5, 5 feet up in the air. It's not quite as tall as the door, but it's just to the side of it. So it's within a place where people could touch her or disturb her if they wanted to. But I had told them, and they know by this point how I feel about creatures. So I just said, don't disturb her. I don't think she's going to cause any harm. And I would go out on my porch and sit and watch her. And for several days, I just kind of sat in awe, watching and being amazed by her. I thought the webs that she was creating daily, each day she would take down the web and redo it, and I thought they were so amazing and beautiful. And it was actually a few days, maybe even a week, before I thought about communicating with her. And I had different questions popping up in my mind. One thing was I was looking way up in the trees, and there were some trees that are so far apart, yet I would see a web that spread from one tree top to the other. And I was thinking, how in the world does this spider build the foundation of their web? Because, when they're going, there's no web there at all, and they very first start to create the web, how are they getting from one tree all the way to the other? Even if they jump, that's a long jump. And then they've got to go back and forth to build that foundation of the web that they're going to continue, rebuilding their web structure upon. And I was thinking, can they fly? I had no idea about this. I at this point had not really looked into spiders that much, or, their behaviors or anything. But the spider that was by my back door had never, I kind of at some point thought about communicating with her, and I was sending out, what I felt like was vibrational communication, but I didn't know if it was going through because I wasn't receiving anything back. So I thought, well, either I'm not communicating properly or, she's not wanting to talk, and that's okay too. It wasn't until there was one day where one of my kids, they came out and saw me just sitting and watching the spider, and they said, "You really love her." They said, one day she's going to disappear and you're going to be really sad. And I said, yeah, maybe, to some extent, but I know how nature works. And they said, well, did you give her a name yet? And I said, no, I didn't think about that. Maybe I'll do that. But then the thought crossed my mind that instead of just giving her a name, maybe she already has a name. So that was the message that I sent to her is, do you have a name? What's your name? And that was the first time that I heard back from her. And I got an image in my mind of just 2 words. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly even now because it was just the words that came in my mind. I didn't hear a voice or anything. But the words that came in my mind was Arancha Argiope. And I thought, Arancha Argiope, that's a beautiful name. I said, is that your first and last name? And she said, no, that's the name of my entire species. And I said, oh, that's neat. And I said, well, I'd like to give you a name if it's okay with you. I said, can I call you Aura for short? And she said, yes. And I just got this feeling of love. Like she loved having that personal name, There was a personal connection that was being formed that she in her lifetime, which I came to find out, she had been born in the spring. So, here she was maybe 5 or 6 months old. She had never connected with a human being before, and many spiders don't, but she was really open to this. She loved it. So from that point on, I called her Aura. And she started to share information with me, even answering some of the questions that I'd had in my mind that I didn't realize were going through to her. She started to answer the questions about like the flight of spiders. I had wondered, could they fly? And she said, yes, we can fly. And she showed me different mental images of, I saw like a lightning bolt symbol, and I saw an electrical plug, like the wall plug, and I saw an electrical cord with, like the plug. And it was like electricity. She said, yes. And I saw an image of static electricity, which came to me as when I pull something out of the dryer and it clings to me, or when I rub a balloon and then touch someone and give them a little shock. And I was like, static electricity. And she said, yes. And I was like, oh, okay. And I just got this feeling of her being able to feel electricity. And I thought, wow, that's something that, we as humans don't really fathom, because I don't think we feel electricity all the time, even though we are electric. We have electricity within our own bodies, but we don't just go around perceiving electricity and manipulating it or, working with it. But I got an image of her floating up. She would spray some strands of webbing into the air, and then her back end just floats up with her legs dangling, and she flies from one place to another on some kind of an invisible force field, which she was saying was electric. And I went from that to looking online, and that was the first time that I discovered about that. This is documented as, it's called ballooning, and it's based on I think a thing called electrostatic repulsion. So that was the first tidbit of information that she shared with me that was kind of on a scientific level, and it triggered my scientific mind. But there was a lot more information that came after that as well. So I'll continue in the next episode. Thanks for joining me.